Welcome to Old Hickory Lake. We're here testing the Fuji X-H1 specifically for video. We've got the X-H1 on a Movi M5. As you can see, the slow motion looks really nice, really crispy. We're shooting all of this footage that you see right here in F-Log, which is a new feature of the X-H1, and it grades beautifully. Oh man, it's cold. It's like freezing out here. What's going on? Fuji came out with the X-T2 over a year ago, and when they implemented 4K and the F-Log feature, I was really excited because I personally love the colors that come out of Fuji cameras. So I tested the Fuji X-T2 personally, and I found that the image wasn't that appealing to me. It was really a pain in the butt to use, and because there was no internal body image stabilization, and because most Fuji lenses don't have IS built in, I just didn't even consider it as an option. As soon as I heard the rumors about the Fuji X-H1 with the IBIS, the new 4K modes, and different things like that, I was pretty excited as a filmmaker because it seemed to tick all the boxes that I wanted when it came to a professional cinema camera. Well, we've got the Fuji X-H1 here, and I'll just list off some of the specs. When it comes to video, the in-body image stabilization is really great. It looks fluid, but I did notice when I was using it on a Movi and when I was doing slow panning shots that the IBIS seemed to kind of jitter and not look correct. So hopefully Fuji will smooth this out in a later firmware update. They've also added 200 megabits per second 4K, not to mention DCI 4K as well. This is a great addition. It's good to have, very professional, looks nice. The files coming off of the Fuji X-H1 are nice and chunky. They grade well. It does take up a lot of storage, but it plays fine in Final Cut X on my MacBook, and I'm really liking the images that are coming off of this camera. I will say, however, I have noticed quite a bit of sharpening and moire going on in the image, so make sure to turn off sharpening, or even better yet, maybe use a black pro mist filter. If you're not familiar with these types of filters, they're used in Hollywood all over the place, and they really smooth out the skin tones and the overall image when it comes to digital pictures. And I think it would pair really well with this camera because the colors coming off of this do emulate the look of traditional motion picture film. We also get F-Log internal on this camera, and I will say it's a really nice log image. It reminds me a lot of the Canon log that we're shooting on right now. It seems to hold roughly 12 stops of dynamic range. It has good color and it grades pretty decent. As you can see, here's some examples of F-Log compared to the grade, and it looks nice. The Fuji X-T2 has phase detect autofocus, and that applies to both video and photo. In 4K mode, however, you didn't get the face tracking mode. You could only get that in 1080p. I personally found that the X-T2 had very reliable autofocus, pretty comparable to a Sony system. So I was hoping that when I saw that face tracking was on this camera, that the autofocus system would be good. However, with this version 1 firmware, I am noticing that the autofocus on video for 4K and 1080 with face tracking is not good. In fact, it is not reliable at all, I would say. Again, Fuji did not include a flip out screen. They have this weird little flip sideways screen and the traditional kind of Sony style flip out screen. It's not a selfie screen, and that's a big letdown. Unfortunately, again, with this camera, just like the X-T2, we have a 1.17x crop on top of that 4K. Really big Debbie Downer there. I really wish to see a full sensor readout from the 4K, but we're not getting that here. If you need a full sensor readout, you got to go to 1080. In addition to 4K, you also get the ability to go up to 120 frames per second in 1080p. It also conforms it to slow-mo in the camera, so you can view it on the back of your screen. It looks nice, it's great. The focus peaking on this camera is amazing. This is actually something that surprisingly doesn't get done well. Panasonic is really really hard to see if you're in focus. Sony is even worse. They are all getting better over time, but Fujifilm has it dialed really well. It reminds me of a small HD monitor or something like that. So if you're using this camera completely manual focus, this camera may be a good option for you. We do get this nice little LCD panel up here. You can completely customize that. You can see how much record time you have. You can see which mode you're in, if you're shooting 4K or 1080. Overall, who is this camera for? Well, in my opinion, I still think this camera is really for photographers. Even though Fuji is marketing this for videographers, and they definitely have upped their game quite a bit when it comes to the video features. But unfortunately for me, with the rolling shutter performance, with the really unintuitive user interface, with these buttons and some of the things that are definitely geared more for photographers, I can honestly say that this camera is not for me. However, this camera would be really great for a hybrid shooter. Maybe somebody that mostly shoots photos, wants really beautiful photos. This camera definitely can perform there. And the occasional 4K video, the occasional slow-mo video, it can do that. Is this a cinema machine? Maybe 5 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago, I would say yes, but because of the Panasonic GH5 and the GH5S, and even the Sony a7 III, which is a full frame camera that can really outperform this camera in terms of autofocus and different video features, I would really recommend a Panasonic or a Sony over this if somebody were asking my opinion. Well, hope you guys enjoyed this video review of the Fuji X-H1. It definitely is a beautiful camera and creates great images. Let me know what you think about this camera for video purposes. Is this something that you want to use for your video production? Make sure to subscribe to our channel. We're producing 2 videos a week on this YouTube channel, so make sure that you keep it locked and enable that bell notification. Once again, I'm Dave Altizer. This is Kinotika. See you next time.